morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Just to tell you why I'm here and who I am. It came about rather suddenly. My husband was leading a retreat day at our church, and he's here with me this morning. And we were looking at Romans 8, and he sent us off to meditate about the whole creation groaning and the words that follow that, and to think about what our passion is. And I came up with 10 things, including clean water for everybody, justice for women and girls around the world, food that's widely distributed, and so on, and so on, and so on. And then in my journal, I wrote that God said to me, "So this is your passion, what are you going to do about it?" We were then asked to share with somebody else. And I shared with the lady I know well. And she said to me, "Trish, we hear your passion. You've got so much more to give." I'm a busy lady already. And then the next morning in church, as God does, I was sitting there, and we're a big church, and a lady came and sat in the row behind me and leant over and talked to me. And she hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. And she said, "It's really good, the group you're leading with your husband." And I said, "But I don't lead it with him." So she said, "Well, what do you do?" So I told her. And then she said, "But you've got so much more to give." And I'm thinking, hang on a minute. And later that week, I was having pastoral supervision with my supervisor, and we were talking about something completely different. But this same thing came up about using your passion and doing something. So I thought, right, if God says it 3 times, you've jolly well got to do something. So my husband and I have supported Tearfund almost since it started. We attended the Cliff Richard concert years and years and years ago when it was a big launch thing. And so I looked on their website, and I'm a lecturer and a tutor, and I thought I'm used to speaking to people. So I'll just have a look and see if they ever have roles for volunteer speakers. And of course they did. And then I looked up what the commitment was, and I thought I can manage that. So I got in touch, I've been trained, and here I am. So I'm here because the Lord has called me to be here, to tell you about Tearfund and its work. So I don't work for them, I'm a volunteer. So thank you for your invitation, and thank you so much for your support. Thank you for those who already know about Tearfund and maybe have been supporting it for years. Thank you for those who are finding out about it. And thank you for all of you for coming to listen to what I've got to say today. So, can we go on? So we're here today, and I feel actually a little bit the poor relation when I hear Ben and all his qualifications and all he's done and all the rest of it. I am just reading what I, have been given to read. But, as I say, I think the Lord has called me to come and talk to you. And you're the biggest gig I've done so far, so there you are. So we're here today to look at ways that we can care for creation and each other, and Dan's already said about caring for each other today, and to consider how it feels to live with the limited resources that many people around the world currently experience. Change is possible. Hope is real. Hope is alive. To discover why that's true, we have to go back to the beginning, the very beginning. In the first few pages of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, we're given the story of creation. What I want us to notice and pay particular attention today is the phrase, "And God saw that it was good." Throughout this chapter, it's repeated 5 times in verses 9, 12, 18, 21, and 25. As God created the seas and the sky, mountains and birds and beasts, God stopped and said it was good. God's creation, this planet that we call home, the whole cosmos, is good. Then at the end of this story, after God created us humans, the chapter ends with the verse 31, "And God saw that it was very good." You, me, all of us here today, and indeed all of humanity together, we are very good. We are made in God's image. The trouble is, we're not often told that story. We're told the story of original sin, but sin doesn't come first, goodness does. The fall doesn't come first, the divine image does. God's story, our story, the story of everything begins with original goodness, original blessing. God didn't make a bad world. Sin is a stain upon the fabric. It is not the fabric itself. So listen to how David describes creation in the Psalms. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. I learnt that by heart for a covenant of speaking competition when I was 16 years old. And here I am saying it again to you. This is a good world, a great world, a world that shouts about God's beauty, power, and splendor through the magnificence of creation. So what's gone wrong? The goodness of this world, the fruitfulness of it, depends upon relationships. God's creation is relational. God is relational, 3 in 1. So God's creational is relational, an interconnected network, a web of life. There are relationships between us and creation, us and each other, us and ourselves, and of course, us and God. If these relationships thrive, we thrive and all creation thrives. But that isn't the case. Beginning with the fall, these relationships have been bruised and indeed broken. The delicate balance keeping all things in harmony has been tipped in favor of greed, selfishness, and pride. The human belief is that we can go it alone, that this world exists for our benefit and not for the glory of God. Many of us will know what happens when relationships get broken. People get hurt, and the world is hurting. That much is clear. The climate crisis is the latest in a series of significant symptoms pointing to how broken our relationships with creation and each other have become. A recent report showed that within the next 30 years, around 1 billion people could be forced from their homes by the climate emergency. That's 1 in 7 people around the world having to leave behind everything they've known and built, and will be a planet of refugees. When thinking about our broken world, let's look at the description of our home in Romans 8:22, where God's whole creation has been groaning, as in the pains of childbirth, right up to the present time. The climate crisis is causing storms to become more powerful, and floods and droughts to become more severe, destroying people's crops, homes, and communities. Even the air we breathe is at risk. As much as 80% of the world's forest, the lungs of the earth, has been destroyed already. Globally, average wildlife populations have dropped to over half in less than 40 years. That's barely a generation. Lord, have mercy on us. It's not merely a crisis, but an injustice, because the people who have done the least to cause the climate crisis, people living in poverty, are most at risk from its effects. As we've seen, this isn't a future problem. People's lives are being impacted today. Now equality is everywhere. We're confronted by some devastating statistics about the number of people around the world without access to the most basic necessities, such as clean water and enough food. If we take a moment to think back on some of these, what shocks you most? What spoke most clearly to you of the brokenness that these situations reveal in our world and in our relationships? Is it lack of water? Is it lack of food? Is it the fact that it's an injustice because the people who've done the least to cause it are the people most at risk? It can be overwhelming to try to get our heads around such a huge issue. But where do we start? It's a giant global problem, but it has very human faces. Individual stories of lives affected and of families struggling to survive. People with names, hopes, worries, and dreams. People like Loyara. Loyara is a mum. She lives in a small village in Burkina Faso where she farms her small plot of land to provide food for her family. Even though she and her husband both live with disabilities, Loyara doesn't have much use of her left hand and foot. She works hard on her land to grow crops so they can eat, but it's a struggle. And it's been made significantly worse by the climate crisis, which in recent years has begun to have disastrous effects on rainfall patterns. In West Africa, where Loyara and her family live, droughts have become more commonplace, and with no rain, there is nothing to eat. Loyara's story, tragically, is not unique. Millions of people in the most vulnerable communities around the world are facing the same fears as she does, the same worries about how they will provide for their children as they're being pushed further into poverty. So this is the problem. But what about the remedy? Our God is a redeemer, and there is a solution. It involves all of us. As we heard a little earlier, God's original purpose for creation was for flourishing relationships between God, humanity, and wider creation. But he also gave us the power to make choices. In a fallen world, we as humanity have broken those relationships, all of them, and yet God does not wash his hands of us and leave us abandoned to destruction. His power and plan speaks of redemption after redemption. It says in Colossians 1:19-20, "For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross." The fullness of restoration, as you know, was made complete in Jesus, but its outworking involves each of us as we look to Jesus and follow him, including in those areas of great need. In 2 Corinthians 5, it says that Christ's love compels us to a ministry of reconciliation. We are called to join with God in with his active, ongoing work towards the renewal of all things. We're called to be a change-making church because of our ultimate hope in God. We're called to work towards the restoration of all relationships between God, between ourselves, and wider creation. In other words, poverty isn't God's plan. You are. We are. We can all play our part. We can all be salt and light, joining this ministry of reconciliation and renewal of all things. We, together as Jesus' disciples, can show the world the difference that love can make. Though the climate crisis can seem overwhelming, let's take heart from the fact that we don't face it alone. We can face it as a global movement of Christ followers, united in faith, hope, and love. Loyara has seen firsthand the difference that love can make. Her life lit up when Tearfund's local church partner worked alongside her community, empowering them to lift themselves out of poverty through training in sustainable farming. Alongside this training, Loyara was given some chickens and taught how to look after them. So now she has chickens that will lay eggs, giving her another way to provide for her family. One of the things that gave Loyara the most joy was in knowing she wasn't alone. She says, "This helps me to recognize God's help. I feel loved by those who've contributed to it. I pray that God helps me to succeed and to be a blessing to my children and others." As I said earlier, hope is real. Hope is alive. Hope for Lyara to feed her family in a changing climate. Hope for all of us, and we can carry that hope in our hearts. Somebody heard it said that action is brought about by bringing together anger and hope. Young people have that anger in spades. In 2020, 9 out of 10 teenagers interviewed were concerned about climate change, but only 1 in 10 felt that their church was doing enough. We should have righteous anger at the way that God's creation has been mistreated and at the way people are suffering. But we also have hope. Hope in the redeeming love of Christ. Hope in the practical solutions that organisations like Tearfund and others are implementing through the local church. We have anger, we have hope, and now we take action. As Christian climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe said, climate change is not only an environmental issue, climate change is a poverty issue, a hunger issue. It's an issue of inequality and injustice. It's a human issue, and that's why we care. Why not commit today to making a difference through our lifestyle choices? You're trying to do that in your church with Ben, to think about how you can make the best use of the resources that the Lord has given, but use them wisely and hopefully in a sustainable way. But it also is about us and making the choices that we do. Not only this, but we also need to engage in the spaces that God has placed us in. Katharine Hayhoe went on to do one of the most famous climate TED Talks of all time, and the title was, "The Most Important Thing You Can Do to Fight Climate Change is Talk About It." A lot of people say that one person can't make a difference, but we are not one person. We are the church, and there are millions, billions of us, each placed by God with our own unique sphere of influence. If all of us make a commitment and use our influence, the change will be extraordinary. And there's another commitment we can make together. It might seem like we can't do much from where we are to reach those families who are already suffering because of the climate crisis. But through supporting Tearfund, we can. Millions of people are being pushed into poverty, but together we can push back harder. At the last count, Tearfund had given training to 38,000 churches around the world to help those churches to teach about those broken relationships and how they can be healed. The relationship between us and God, between us and each other, between us and ourselves, and between us and creation. And it's making a huge difference. They talk to the communities and they find out what the community needs, and that together with the church driving this, the communities are being changed, the churches are growing, so they have to build new ones, and they want to roll this out to 250,000 churches by 2030. That's a huge ask in the next 5 years. But if they can do that, imagine all those people whose lives are going to be changed. And most of you should have been given a Tear Times today, which gives you lots of stories about what's happening around the world and how Tearfund is working. You've also been given a leaflet which has a giving page in it. Of course, you can give online, but also you could fill the thing in and send in a check. They still accept those. £6 a month, only £6 a month could train 3 farmers in climate-resilient farming techniques, enabling them to provide for their families and lift them out of poverty. Whatever you give, even if you can't commit to giving monthly, whatever you give will help Tearfund to provide life-changing training for communities. The changes we make in our lives can have a profound effect on future generations, on our children and our children's children. Sadly, for so many people, the damage is already done, but we're asking you to step in today and help repair some of that damage. Thank you.